We have two of our outstanding architecture seniors with us today, and Erica Garfinkel and Chelsea Brown are great examples of a few things in the school, I would say. One is that it's not the case that the only changes that we've seen in our fields is towards technological change. There's been a huge change also, I would say, in the orientation of students, certainly in the time between when I went to school and when we're teaching students now. Students are much more engaged with social issues, I think, than they were when I was in architecture school. And both of these students, I think, can convey that a bit. Chelsea Brown has been a leader in our Freedom by Design program, which is, I shouldn't say ours, her Freedom by Design program, which has worked to most recently build a handicap accessible ramp for a temple in Cambridge that needed it, and really coordinated a whole bunch of students to help do that. Erica Garfinkel has, in addition to working at Cohn Pedersen Fox, a major international firm located in New York, both of these students have also done projects with Peter Wiederspan in the honors program, one in Mumbai and the other in Buenos Aires. So spreading the sort of tentacles of their work out all over the world. It's really a pleasure to introduce them both to you, and let's see what they are going to show us about those projects. Thank you.
Okay, as George said, I'm Chelsea.
America.
We both are fifth-year seniors, and we have been working on we have individually been working on 2-semester research projects. As George said, I was focusing on Mumbai and Erica Buenos Aires, and we've been working with Peter individually on these projects. And so part of the project was to put together a proposal for the honors office, as well as applying for grants that allowed us to travel to our respective cities.
And then my project was a little different from Chelsea's, in which I set up my project to engage with humans in the form of interviews while I was in Buenos Aires.
Oh, it is so much time.
Oh, no.
Okay, keep going.
And that went, so then I had to apply to the Institutional Review Board for that, which is essentially the same process that someone who's in biology would be doing if they wanted to test on like human subjects. So it's something really different for the College of Arts, Media, and Design to be involved in the Institutional Review Board. It was a really extensive process that involved both a training by me and Peter online to know about human subjects testing, and then also the translation of any of my interview documents into Spanish once I got to Buenos Aires. Chelsea and I both set our projects up in a sort of 3-part system, where our first semester was spent really developing our thesis and tapping into any research we could within the United States. And then we split up our second semester of school with a travel semester. As we said earlier, I went to Buenos Aires in the summer 2012. Chelsea went to Mumbai this past winter. So my project focused on urban slums, but instead of looking at them in the terms of most architectural research, we're finding a solution. I was aiming to prove that the slums actually have something to offer the Western world in terms of the way they're conceived urbanistically and architecturally. So my case study was Villa 31 in Buenos Aires, which is the largest slum in the city, home to 90,000. While I was there, I experienced some cultural differences in research. So what would essentially be a ratio of research-intensive days in the United States to those in Buenos Aires experienced a lot different. Just the formalities of Argentina are very different from the United States. While I was there, though, I was able to complete 7 architect interviews, one in English, the rest in Spanish, and some other interviews with visa residents. Something also important that I did is I essentially audited classes at the Universidad de Buenos Aires there. I was working in their Center for Experimental Production, working with recycled materials and making building components out of it. It was something that they were already doing. I tapped into a little bit. So for my synthesis semester, I really focused on 2 headlines for what the slums have to offer. The first is resiliency and evolution. So this is showing an aerial view of Villa 31, and on the bottom are their sort of evolution throughout the process. What's important to notice is in 2000, there was a mega highway straight through the site that instead of hindering development within the area, it actually spurred development. So sort of an interesting urban situation that's happening there. Something else I looked at in terms of the resilient city is high density at a small scale and mixed use development that inherently occurs within these settlements. And then also the engagement between open space and circulation. The traditional Western model would, shown here, would go around these spaces, whereas in the Vijas, they really engage with them. Second key heading was adaptability and aggregation. This is more on the architectural scale. So essentially all of these buildings have this framework for different unit types that can then not only change physically, but change occupancy at a fairly regular rate. That was a really quick synopsis of my project. So right now I'm in the process of finishing that. Here's Chelsea.
My project was based on the idea of connecting textiles and architecture. This kind of follows a lot of the work produced by Gottfried Semper, Frank Lloyd Wright, and Kenneth Frampton. And so what I wanted to do was set this idea of textiles and architecture within the urbanism of Mumbai. And to do this, I created my own research methodology, which involved a matrix. I have the terms aesthetic, means, environment, as well as boundaries, grounding, and identity, and it was connecting ideas between these two sets of terms that allowed me to implement my research in Mumbai. This was more of what I anticipated seeing. I traveled there over the winter break, and I expected to see these kind of like big textile structures. This here is seen, I think it's like a wedding tent with some housing behind. This is what I anticipated seeing, but this is what I saw more often. And so taking from this, it's more the utilization of like found materials, and you see the blue tarps, and the way these materials are used to extend the spaces, extend the occupiable ground by creating shade. And this, the temporary nature of the materials and the way they're applied has been more informative in my project. Here you can see the layering of the tarps, and so critical to this idea is temporality and how to create space over time that continues through time while being impacted by the weather and climate. So what I'm doing now is I'm taking the ideas that I learned from my research and from my travel and distilling them into prototypical conditions that I think can be applied in other developing cities as well as back in Boston.
So yeah, this was an experience that Chelsea and I both got to do, both through architecture and the honors department. And I think we both see that as a pretty valuable thing that we got a global experience while in our undergraduate education.
Good.